Just one more. You can do it. No. Keep breathing.
At 2:17 in the morning, Elara Vale gave birth in a locked fertility clinic, with no doctor beside her, no family holding her hand, and no one answering when she screamed for help. But the moment her daughter cried, someone finally entered the room. A nurse Elara had never seen lifted the baby, stared at a tiny silver streak in her black hair, and whispered into a phone, "The first one survived." Then the lights went out. When Elara woke, the crib was empty. The clinic director told her that her baby had been stillborn. He refused to show her the body. He refused to call the police, and before sunrise, every record of Elara's pregnancy had vanished from the clinic's system. 3 days later, the entire city watched Mafia Queen Serafina Moretti leave a private hospital carrying her newborn daughter. The baby had Elara's daughter's face. The same dark eyes, the same tiny dimple beneath the lower lip, the same impossible silver streak in her hair. Elara and Serafina had never met. They had used different clinics. They had never shared a donor. Yet when a stolen drop of blood was finally tested, the result did not say the babies were sisters. It said they were identical. And somewhere beneath the city, one infant was still crying in a room that officially did not exist. Elara had wanted only one thing in her life that no one could take from her: a family. She was a 26-year-old Omega who restored old books in a quiet shop near the river. She repaired torn pages, rebuilt broken spines, and spent her days saving stories other people had abandoned. Her own life was less easy to repair. She had grown up moving between foster homes. Every promise of permanence had ended with a packed bag. So when she finally saved enough for fertility treatment, she chose to become a mother alone. She did not need a wealthy alpha, a grand house, or a famous name. She needed one child who would wake each morning knowing she had been wanted. The St. Aurelia Fertility Center accepted Elara through a special program for low-income Omegas. The treatment cost almost nothing. The clinic director, Dr. Adrian Kessler, called it a charitable grant. "Someone believes women like you deserve a chance," he told her. Elara should have asked who that someone was. Her pregnancy seemed normal. The scans showed one healthy baby. The clinic called every week, sometimes asking strange questions about her appetite, her sleep, and the strength of the baby's movements. They requested blood tests more often than necessary. When Elara questioned it, Kessler smiled and said Omegas required careful monitoring. Then, 2 weeks before her due date, a message arrived telling her to report to the clinic immediately. A storm had flooded the roads. Her contractions had only just begun, but the message warned that her baby was in danger. By the time Elara arrived, the building looked abandoned. Only one nurse waited inside. Elara labored for 11 hours. The nurse kept leaving the room to answer calls. No ambulance came, no doctor appeared, and when the baby finally arrived, Elara saw her for less than 10 seconds. She saw 10 perfect fingers. She heard a strong cry, and she watched the nurse carry her daughter through a steel door at the end of the hall. Then something cold entered Elara's IV. Before her eyes closed, she heard Kessler's voice outside the room. "Keep the first viable subject stable. We still need the second delivery." If you were Elara, would you believe the clinic's story? Or would those 6 words be enough to make you risk everything? Hold on to your answer, because what she did next turned a grieving Omega into the most dangerous witness in the city. Elara woke 12 hours later with an empty womb and an empty crib. Dr. Kessler stood beside her bed, wearing a grey suit instead of surgical clothes. He told her there had been complications. He said her daughter had not survived long enough to be registered. When Elara demanded to see the body, he claimed it had already been transferred for cremation under a consent form. Elara had signed no such form. She tried to stand, but pain folded her in half. Kessler placed a discharge envelope beside her and advised her to go home. Inside the envelope was enough cash to pay her rent for 5 years. That was when grief became suspicion. Elara left the money on the bed. She stumbled into the rain and went straight to the police, but the officer at the desk searched the clinic's database and found no admission under her name. Her treatment file was gone. Her appointment messages had disappeared from her phone. Even the ultrasound portal returned an error. Someone had not merely stolen her baby. Someone had erased the proof that the baby had existed. For 3 days, Elara searched alone. She waited outside the clinic. She followed staff members. She called every hospital and mortuary in the city. No one helped her. Some pitied her. Others assumed grief had broken her mind. Then every television in the bookshop showed the same breaking news. Serafina Moretti, head of the Moretti crime family, had given birth to a daughter. The reporters called the baby the future heir to an empire built on shipping, gambling, and secrets. Serafina appeared at the private hospital entrance, surrounded by armed guards. She wore black, despite having given birth only hours earlier. Her face was pale, but her posture was unbowed. In her arms rested a newborn wrapped in deep red silk. Elara nearly looked away. Then the baby opened her eyes. Elara dropped the cup in her hand. The infant had the same long lashes, the same dimple, and a silver streak running through the hair above her right temple. Elara had touched that streak before the nurse carried her daughter away. The camera moved closer. For one terrible second, Elara felt certain she was looking at her own child. But the dates made no sense. Serafina's baby had been born that morning, 3 days after Elara's delivery. Elara printed every photograph she could find. She placed them beside the final ultrasound image she had hidden inside an old dictionary. The face on the scan was soft and unfinished, but the curve of the nose matched. So did the unusual shape of the left ear. At midnight, Elara found one more detail. The red silk around Serafina's baby had slipped in one photograph, revealing a hospital tag around her ankle. The tag did not carry a name. It carried a code, E2. Elara remembered the words she had heard in the clinic. The first viable subject. The second delivery. The next morning, still weak and bleeding, Elara walked into the most heavily guarded hospital in the country. She did not know whether Serafina Moretti had stolen her child, purchased her, or ordered the entire pregnancy. She knew only that the answer was upstairs. And if you're already wondering whether the Mafia Queen was a villain or another piece on someone else's board, subscribe now, because the next door Elara opened made both possibilities look equally terrifying. Elara entered through the service corridor, wearing a borrowed cleaner's uniform. She kept her eyes lowered as guards moved through the halls. The Moretti family had taken over the entire top floor, but the scent of antiseptic could not hide the sharp trace of alpha pheromones marking the elevators. Serafina was known as the Ice Queen. She had taken control of the family at 32, after her father was assassinated. 3 rival bosses had tried to remove her. All 3 had disappeared. Newspapers described her as elegant, disciplined, and incapable of mercy. Elara repeated those words to herself as the elevator rose. When the doors opened, she saw 2 guards at the far end of the corridor and a nurse entering room 901. Elara pushed her cart past them, waited until the nurse left, and slipped inside. The room was dark except for the city lights beyond the windows. Serafina slept upright in the bed, one hand resting near a pistol on the bedside table. A bassinet stood beside her. Elara forgot every plan she had made. She crossed the room and looked down. The baby slept with one fist beneath her chin. She was beautiful, she was familiar, but the moment Elara touched her cheek, she knew. This was not the child she had held for 10 seconds. Her Omega instincts recognized the difference before her mind did. This baby's scent was almost the same, but not completely. It felt like hearing the same melody played on another instrument. There had been 2 babies. Serafina's hand closed around Elara's wrist. "Move again," the Mafia Queen whispered, "and you will not leave this room." Elara looked into silver-grey eyes and saw neither weakness nor surprise. Serafina pulled her closer with astonishing strength for someone who had just given birth. "Who sent you?" Serafina asked. "The woman whose baby your clinic stole." For the first time, Serafina's expression changed. Elara placed the photograph of her ultrasound on the bed. Then she showed Serafina a picture from the delivery room that she had recovered from an automatic cloud backup. In the corner of the image, the newborn's silver-streaked hair was visible. Serafina stared at it too long. "Where did you get that?" "I gave birth 3 days ago." "That is impossible. So is your daughter wearing a tag marked E2. Serafina released her wrist and looked toward the bassinet. Confusion crossed her face, followed by something more vulnerable than Elara expected: fear. Before either woman could speak again, the hospital lights died. The lock clicked shut. A red laser appeared on the baby's blanket. Elara threw herself over the bassinet as the window shattered. Serafina fired once into the darkness. A man in surgical scrubs fell behind the curtain, a tranquilizer rifle sliding from his hands. Another attacker came through the bathroom door. Serafina tried to stand, but pain buckled her knees. Elara grabbed the metal IV pole and struck the man across the face. He reached for the baby. Elara struck him again. The guards broke through the door seconds later. Serafina could have ordered Elara killed. Instead, she pointed at the attackers and said, "Take them alive." Then she looked at the Omega shielding her child. "And bring her with us." Pause on that choice. If Serafina had planned the stolen pregnancy, why had armed men just tried to take her baby too? Keep that question in mind, because Elara was about to enter the Queen's home and discover whether she had been rescued or captured. Elara was taken to the Moretti estate before dawn. It was not a prison, but every exit was guarded. Serafina placed her in a bedroom across the hall from the nursery and assigned a doctor to treat her. Elara refused food, medicine, and rest until someone told her where her daughter was. Serafina entered alone. Without the black coat and armed entourage, she looked less like a queen and more like an exhausted new mother. She carried her baby against her chest, calming her with a slow sway. "Her name is Alessia," Serafina said. "Did you choose it?" "Yes." "Did you choose me?" Serafina's jaw tightened. She explained that the Moretti family had arranged her treatment at the exclusive Valmont Institute. After an assassination attempt left her unable to conceive naturally, doctors retrieved several of her eggs. The family council selected a donor. Serafina was told that only one embryo had survived. She had never heard of Elara. She had never authorized a second implantation, and she had never been treated at Saint Aurelia. Elara wanted to believe her. That frightened her more than hatred would have. Then Serafina showed her a document bearing her own signature. It authorized something called Protocol Gemini. Before I tell you what that protocol meant, decide who you trust right now. Elara, whose records vanished, or Serafina, whose signature appeared on the experiment? Put one name in the comments, because the truth was hidden in the one detail both women had overlooked. The signature looked genuine. Serafina said it was not. Her chief physician, Dr. Lucien Voss, had brought papers to her the night before her embryo transfer. She had been sedated. She remembered signing routine consent forms, but Protocol Gemini had never been mentioned. Elara examined the page. In the bottom corner was the logo of a charitable foundation. The same foundation had paid for her fertility treatment. Moretti Legacy Trust. Elara pushed the document back across the table. Your money paid them to use me. My family's money, Serafina replied. Not my order. That distinction will not bring my daughter back. Serafina went still. Then she carefully placed Alessia in Elara's arms. Elara stared at her. Why are you doing this? Because she stops crying when you hold her. The baby curled against Elara's chest. A tiny sound escaped her, and Elara's anger cracked around the edges. Her body had been aching for the child stolen from it. Holding Alessia did not erase that pain. It made the absence sharper. Yet the infant settled as though she recognized the heartbeat. Serafina watched them with an expression Elara could not read. If there is another child, Serafina said quietly, I will find her. Because she shares your blood. Because she is ours. The words stayed between them. Ours, not mine. Elara looked up. For the first time, she saw that Serafina was not claiming both babies for herself. She was making room for Elara inside the promise. Their first clue came from the dead attacker's phone. He had received an encrypted message minutes before entering the hospital. E2 confirmed stable. Recover before comparative assessment. Serafina's security chief traced the message to a server registered under a pharmaceutical company owned by her aunt, Vittoria Moretti. Vittoria had raised Serafina after her mother's death. She chaired the family council. She had negotiated the fertility treatment. And she had spent months insisting that the Moretti bloodline needed a perfect heir. Serafina refused to accuse her without proof. Elara did not share that hesitation. Your aunt called my baby a subject. We do not know that. You don't want to know it. Serafina stepped closer. Her alpha scent sharpened, not threatening, but wounded. Do you think ignorance protects me from this? Someone entered my body. Someone used my child as an experiment. I understand your anger better than anyone in this house. Elara's reply died on her lips. For all Serafina's wealth and power, the same choice had been stolen from her. Elara had been selected because she was poor enough to erase. Serafina had been selected because she was valuable enough to control. Different cages, built by the same hands. That night, Alessia developed a fever. The estate doctor said it was mild, but Elara noticed the baby turning away from the bottle. She remembered doing the same thing in the womb whenever Elara ate citrus. She asked for a different formula. The doctor dismissed her. Serafina did not. She ordered the formula changed. Alessia drank and fell asleep. You knew, Serafina whispered. A mother knows her baby. Serafina's eyes met hers. Which one? Elara looked down at Alessia. Maybe both. Something softened between them that neither woman was ready to name. If that answer made you see Elara and Serafina differently, remember this moment. Their children were connecting them faster than trust could grow, and the DNA test waiting downstairs could either make them a family or turn them into enemies forever. The next day, Serafina arranged a private DNA test using Alessia's blood and a sample left on the blanket Elara had taken from Saint Aurelia. The blanket contained a tiny dried stain from the first baby's heel. The geneticist called Serafina personally. He said contamination was impossible. The two samples matched at every tested marker. The babies were not ordinary sisters. They were monozygotic twins. Identical twins carried by two different women. Ilara's knees weakened. Serafina caught her before she fell. For several seconds, Ilara remained against her, one hand gripping the front of Serafina's shirt. The alpha's heartbeat was fast beneath her palm. "Tell me she is alive," Ilara whispered. Serafina held her tighter. "Until I see proof otherwise, we believe she is." The DNA result answered one question and created a worse one. How could one embryo become two pregnancies in women who had never met? The answer was waiting in a freezer log at Valmont Institute. And the person who offered to help them steal it was the last person Ilara expected. Dr. Kessler called the estate. He was crying. "If this mystery has you searching every clue, stay with me." Kessler was about to explain how two women carried identical twins, but the reason for the 3-day gap was only the beginning of what the clinic had done. Kessler asked to meet at the abandoned St. Aurelia Center. He claimed Vittoria's people were hunting him. Serafina suspected a trap. Ilara insisted on going. They entered through the same corridor where Ilara had last heard her daughter cry. The delivery room had been stripped clean. The steel door at the end of the hall stood open. Behind it was an elevator. The elevator descended 3 floors below a building that officially had no basement. There they found a laboratory filled with empty incubators, surgical equipment, and rows of locked files. On one wall, photographs of pregnant women had been arranged in pairs. Some wore designer clothes. Others wore uniforms from factories, restaurants, and cleaning companies. Powerful women and invisible women. Each pair had been assigned the same embryo code. Kessler emerged from the shadows with blood on his collar. He admitted that St. Aurelia and Valmont were two faces of the same program. Valmont treated the wealthy clients. St. Aurelia recruited Omegas who had no money, no influence, and no one likely to investigate if something went wrong. Protocol Gemini began at the 2-cell stage of an embryo's development. The technicians separated the 2 early cells and allowed each one to grow into a new embryo. Because both came from the same fertilized egg, the resulting children would carry essentially identical DNA. One embryo was implanted into the intended mother, the other was secretly implanted into a second woman as a biological backup. Serafina's original embryo had been created from her egg and the selected donor's genetic material. The lab divided it. One half went back into Serafina at Valmont. The other was placed inside Ilara at St. Aurelia. Ilara touched her abdomen as though she could still feel the theft. "You told me it was my chosen donor embryo." Kessler lowered his eyes. "Your embryo was discarded." The room seemed to tilt. Ilara had loved her daughter from the first positive test. She had spoken to her every night. She had built a crib by hand and painted stars above it. Now a stranger was telling her that the child had never been genetically hers. Serafina stepped between them. "Do not confuse genetics with motherhood," she said. "Ilara carried that child. Ilara gave her life. No laboratory can remove her from the story." Kessler explained the delivery gap next. The embryos had been implanted within hours of each other, but they had grown in separate bodies, separate placentas, separate hormone cycles, separate pregnancies. Twins usually shared one womb and therefore one labor. These twins did not. Ilara went into labor first. Serafina's labor began 3 days later. The gap was not a miracle. It was evidence that the babies had never shared a womb. Did you predict the split embryo reveal, or did the 3-day delivery gap fool you? Say, "I knew it," or "You got me," in the comments. But do not relax yet. The clinic had not created 2 pregnancies simply to ensure one healthy birth. "Why 2 pregnancies?" Ilara asked. "Why not freeze the second embryo?" Kessler's face went pale. Because embryos cannot be compared as heirs. Vittoria did not want a backup pregnancy merely in case one failed. She wanted both babies born alive so the family could compare them. Birth weight, immune response, alpha or omega presentation markers, neurological reflexes, heart strength, every measurable trait. Only the stronger child would be kept as the Moretti heir. The other would disappear. Serafina grabbed Kessler by the throat. "Where is the first baby?" "She was stable when I left." "Where?" Kessler looked toward a security camera in the corner. "Not here. They moved her to the assessment wing, beneath the old Moretti maternity hospital." Then a gunshot cracked through the laboratory. Kessler fell. The security screen came alive, and Vittoria Moretti appeared on it. She wore white, like a grandmother arriving at a christening. "Serafina," she said calmly, "you were never supposed to meet the spare." Steel shutters dropped over every exit. Gas began pouring through the vents. Ilara and Serafina ran deeper into the lab. Serafina covered Ilara's mouth with a wet cloth, but her own steps became unsteady. She was still healing. Her body had not recovered from childbirth, the hospital attack, or the journey underground. Ilara found an emergency oxygen tank and forced the mask over Serafina's face. "You need it more," Serafina argued. "Your daughter needs you." "Our daughters need both of us." Even there, with alarms screaming and poison filling the room, Serafina said both. Ilara found the fire control panel and smashed the glass. The sprinklers activated, ventilation fans reversing long enough for Serafina's guards to force open the elevator shaft. They escaped with the freezer log and Kessler's encrypted drive, but Kessler died before he could give them the exact location of the hidden nursery. And when Serafina opened the drive, they found assessment scores for both babies. E1, Ilara's daughter, had the stronger heart. E2, Alessia, carried the better neurological markers. The final selection field was still blank. Vittoria had not decided which baby would live. Here is the choice at the center of this story. If someone told you only one child could be saved, would you choose the one you gave birth to or the one in your arms? Subscribe if you believe no mother should ever face that choice, because Ilara and Serafina were about to give Vittoria an answer she never calculated. Back at the estate, Serafina ordered every Moretti property searched. Vittoria had already vanished from the family mansion. The old maternity hospital had been closed for 20 years and contained 6 underground wings. Searching room by room would take too long. Ilara studied the files instead. She noticed that every baby in Protocol Gemini had been identified by the mother's initial and a number. Yet her daughter was listed as E1, even though Serafina's surname began with M. E did not stand for Ilara. It stood for Embryo Group Epsilon. At the bottom of the page was a second code, N7, Nursery 7. Serafina assembled a team, but the family council blocked her. Vittoria had told them Ilara was a delusional kidnapper, manipulating a weakened alpha. Several captains demanded that Serafina surrender custody of Alessia until her judgment could be evaluated. Serafina entered the council chamber, carrying her daughter. Ilara waited outside and heard 12 men challenge the woman they claimed to serve. Then Serafina opened the door and called her in. The room fell silent at the sight of the Omega. Serafina placed Alessia in Ilara's arms before the entire council. "This woman carried my daughter's twin," she said. "She was violated under my family's name. From this moment, an attack on Ilara Vale is an attack on me. Her child is a Moretti by blood, and Ilara is her mother by every law that matters." One captain laughed. Serafina removed the Moretti ring from her finger and set it on the table. If this family requires me to sacrifice one daughter to rule it, then the family may find another queen. No one laughed again. Outside the chamber, Ilara confronted her. You gave up your throne. I gave them a choice. And if they choose Vittoria? Serafina looked at Alessia, sleeping against Ilara's shoulder. Then I will build something better from the ashes. Ilara had spent her life believing powerful people protected only what they owned. Serafina had just risked everything for a child she had never seen and an Omega she had known for less than 2 days. Why do you trust me? Ilara asked. You crossed a guarded hospital 3 days after giving birth. You threw yourself over a baby you thought had been stolen from you. And when the gas came, you gave me the oxygen. Serafina stepped closer. Trust is not the difficult part. What is? Serafina's gaze dropped to Ilara's lips, then returned to her eyes. Wanting a future when we may not survive the night. Ilara's breath caught. For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to the warmth between them. Then Alessia stirred, and the moment broke. But the promise of it remained. Right here, would you let yourself fall for Serafina? Or would her family name still be too dangerous to trust? Choose before they enter Nursery 7, because the woman waiting there knew exactly how to turn that doubt into a weapon. Half the council chose Serafina. It was enough. They entered the old maternity hospital through a tunnel beneath the chapel. Nursery 7 was located behind a sealed surgical ward. The hall smelled of dust and bleach. Empty cribs stood beneath faded paintings of clouds. At the final door, they found a scanner requiring a newborn's genetic code. Serafina pressed Alessia's hospital card to the reader. The lock opened. Inside were 6 incubators. 5 were empty. In the 6th, beneath a thin blue blanket, lay Ilara's daughter. Ilara stopped breathing. The baby was smaller than Alessia. Sensors covered her chest. A bruise darkened one heel from repeated blood tests. But when Ilara whispered, "Mama is here," the infant opened her eyes. Her cry was weak. It was still the most beautiful sound Ilara had ever heard. She lifted her daughter from the incubator and pressed her against her skin. The baby rooted toward her heartbeat, recognizing the body that had carried her. Serafina stood beside them with tears on her face. "What is her name?" she asked. Ilara had chosen 1 month ago, but had been afraid to say it after the clinic declared her dead. Isla? Serafina touched one finger to Isla's tiny hand. "Welcome back, Isla." Then the lights turned red. Vittoria's voice filled the nursery. "You found the spare. How sentimental." Doors opened on both sides, and armed guards entered. Vittoria walked between them holding a tablet with the baby's final medical scores. She looked at Isla, then at Alessia, in the carrier against Serafina's chest. "One has the superior heart," she said. "The other has the superior mind. Nature divided perfection. I was determining which flaw the family could tolerate." Ilara held Isla closer. "They are children. They are succession." Serafina drew her weapon. Vittoria smiled. "Did you truly think I used you without permission? Your signature is on every order." She displayed a recording of Serafina signing the documents. The angle made the evidence look undeniable. Ilara looked at Serafina. For the first time, doubt returned. Vittoria saw it. She knew there would be a second womb, she told Ilara. She simply did not expect the second mother to survive. The cruelest lie is the one built around a piece of truth. Serafina had signed something. Ilara had seen the page. "So tell me honestly, in that room, with 2 babies at gunpoint, would you still trust the Mafia Queen?" Keep listening, because Ilara's answer depended on something no camera had captured. Elara remembered the night at the estate when Serafina had placed Alessia in her arms. She remembered the oxygen mask. She remembered a ring set down before 12 armed men. Evidence could be forged. Fear could be performed. But power was rarely surrendered as an act. Elara stepped beside Serafina. "If she wanted me dead, I would never have left the hospital." Vittoria's smile faded. Serafina glanced at Elara, and the gratitude in her eyes was almost painful. Then she looked at the recording more carefully. "Play the audio," she said. Vittoria did not move. "There is no audio, is there?" Serafina recognized the room in the video. It was Valmont's recovery suite. She had signed those pages after being injected with a sedative that caused short-term memory loss. Dr. Voss had covered the top half of each document and presented only the signature lines. The video did not prove consent. It proved incapacity. Elara took Kessler's drive from her coat and held it up. "And this proves everything else." Vittoria ordered her guards to fire. None of them moved. Serafina's loyal captains had intercepted their families outside the hospital and shown them the Protocol Gemini files. Several guards had children of their own. Others had discovered their wives and sisters among the women photographed in the underground lab. The experiment was larger than the Moretti heir. Vittoria had created backup children for powerful families across the country. The guards lowered their weapons. Vittoria lunged for Alessia. Elara turned, shielding both babies with her body. Serafina caught her aunt's wrist. The two alphas struggled beside the incubators until Vittoria drew a hidden blade and drove Serafina against the wall. Elara saw the blade rise. She grabbed a metal tray and struck the fire alarm. Foam exploded from the ceiling. Vittoria lost her footing, and Serafina disarmed her. For one furious second, Serafina held the blade at her aunt's throat. Vittoria smiled. "There she is," she whispered. "The queen I made." Serafina looked at Elara. She looked at Isla and Alessia. Then she dropped the blade. "No," she said. "The queen you made would kill you. Their mother is teaching me to become someone else." She ordered Vittoria arrested and handed the drive to a prosecutor outside Moretti Control. It meant exposing the family's secret finances and risking her own empire. Serafina did it anyway. Was Serafina right to spare Vittoria and expose everything? Or had she shown mercy to someone who deserved none? Hold that judgment, because defeating the conspiracy was easier than deciding what kind of family could survive it. The hidden wards were raided before dawn. 4 infants were rescued. 23 women learned that embryos had been implanted without their informed consent. Some children had already been placed in wealthy homes under false birth records. The search for them would take years. But Isla came home that night. For the first week, Elara slept in a chair between 2 bassinets. She woke at every sound. If Isla breathed too softly, panic seized her. If Alessia cried, Elara lifted her too. Serafina often found all 3 asleep together by sunrise. One night, Serafina placed a blanket over Elara's shoulders. "You should rest in a bed," she whispered. Elara opened one eye. "So should you." Queens do not sleep. Mothers do, if another mother takes the next feeding. Serafina smiled. It was the first time Elara had seen her do it without restraint. They began with a schedule. Then they began sharing meals. Elara learned that Serafina hated coffee but drank it because everyone expected her to. Serafina learned that Elara hummed when she was frightened and lied about being cold when she wanted someone near. Neither woman spoke about the almost kiss at the estate. They did not need to. The silence grew warmer each day. When Isla was strong enough to leave the medical wing, Elara prepared to return to her small apartment. She assumed Serafina would keep Alessia and allow visits between the twins. Serafina found her packing. "Where are you going?" "Home." "This is your home?" "This is a Moretti estate." "Then I will put your name on it." Ilara shook her head. "You cannot solve every fear with property." Serafina moved closer. "Then tell me how to solve this one." "Which fear?" "That you will leave with half my heart, and believe I only asked you to stay for the children." Ilara went still. Serafina had faced assassins without trembling. Now her hands shook. "I do not know what we are supposed to call this," Serafina said. "We were strangers, then we were victims of the same crime, then we became mothers to the same two daughters. Somewhere between the hospital and Nursery 7, you became the person I look for whenever a door opens." Ilara's eyes filled with tears. "You are still a terrifying woman. I can work on that. Your family may never accept me. I can replace them." Ilara laughed through her tears. That was terrifying again. Serafina finally smiled. Ilara closed the distance and kissed her. It was not the desperate kiss of two people escaping death. It was gentle, uncertain, and full of everything they still had to learn. Serafina touched Ilara's face, as though asking permission, even after Ilara had answered. "If you have been waiting for that kiss since the hospital, this was their real victory. Not the throne, not the evidence, but the moment both women finally chose a future no one had designed for them." In the nursery, one of the twins began to cry. Then the other joined her. Ilara rested her forehead against Serafina's. "Our daughters have terrible timing. They got that from your side. They are genetically yours." Serafina kissed her again. "Exactly, your side." Months later, the court recognized Ilara as Isla's legal mother and co-guardian of Alessia. Serafina dissolved the family council and turned the Moretti Legacy Trust into a fund for the women harmed by the fertility program. She did not become innocent overnight. Empires built in darkness do not transform because of one good decision. But she began dismantling the parts that had treated people as assets. Ilara reopened the bookshop with a nursery upstairs. Serafina often arrived after sunset, leaving guards at the door and her shoes beside the stairs. The woman feared across the city would sit on the floor and read stories to two identical girls who always reached for both mothers. The twins grew at different rates. Isla remained slightly smaller. Alessia laughed first. Isla walked first. Their DNA was identical, but they were never interchangeable. They liked different songs, slept in different positions, and reached for different hands when frightened. That was the final truth Vittoria had never understood. Strength could not be measured by choosing one child over another. Alessia's mind did not make Isla's heart less valuable. Serafina's blood did not make Ilara's motherhood less real. And sharing a beginning did not condemn the twins to share the same destiny. They had started as one embryo, divided in secret, and placed inside two women who had never met. They were born 3 days apart because they grew in separate wombs. The clinic hid Isla to compare both infants and keep only the child judged strong enough to inherit a criminal empire. And the Mafia Queen, who first appeared to be the architect of the conspiracy, had been used by the same family that claimed to protect her. But what the conspirators meant, as an experiment, created the one thing they could not control: a family chosen by two mothers. So here is the question I want you to answer. If you were Ilara, could you build a life with Serafina after everything done in her family's name? Or would love never be enough to restore that trust? Write "stay" or "leave" in the comments, and tell me the moment that decided it for you.